Well, good afternoon, listeners. You're listening to Lament of Hope podcast. And as I always say, coming on here, I'm so grateful for the many listeners to all of the episodes that have come out, but also just so many people I've talked to. It's been a huge gift. And today I'm speaking with Remigio Pereira. Um, I've known about his career since he was with the Tenors. He was with them a really long time. He helped found the company. He was like one of the originals that was part of the group. And he has a beautiful voice. I mean, some of my favorite songs he sang, while particularly with them, was Caruso.
Mm.
Nada Mas was one I also really loved, which forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it, but it's a
That's good.
Portuguese song that he dedicated to his dad when he passed away. And it's beautiful because it talks about not wanting any more pain. And I think that's just something that
Mm.
as humans we all relate to. And it's just a very visceral song, so I do encourage you to look it up. But then
Mm.
after his time with the Tenors ended, which was it was a bitter, hard separation. It was over the news and it was covered on multiple networks, and you had Remigio being interviewed, and then you had the Tenors being interviewed, and it was just a really, really rough time for a while.
Mm.
Remigio did end up 2 years later coming out with a solo album called Vox and Audito, which is kind of I'd say it's a musical journey of where like what happened to him in those 2 years, how he grew, the struggles he had. And some of those pieces are very beautiful. I have that CD as well, and I've played it many times during times when I was
Mm.
just going through emotional turmoil, whatever it was, just because it's very if you listen to it in the way he wrote the songs and the way he recorded them, it kind of sounds like a man crying out in the wilderness. So you can relate to it, even if you don't
Yeah.
uh, have the exact same story. But Remigio, thank you so
Mhm.
much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Danielle, and appreciate you having me on.
So, I want to start out actually, I wanted to ask you, um, is there a song in particular over your entire career that you're most proud of?
Oh, I think there's uh, it's hard to give one song. I mean, every song has a particular is almost like a soundtrack to a moment in time, and so um, the way things have happened for me is that a lot of the songs came to be um, almost without any, you know, without me having to do anything really. Things just kind of came out. I feel there was divine inspiration through most of all the songs in Vox Inaudito and everything afterwards too. I mean, so but obviously I think I Did It for Peace was one of the first songs that when it came out, I didn't even think about it. I pressed record on my phone and I just sat at the piano. There was the thunderstorm that was happening outside, and there was a storm happening in my life at the time. And I lit a candle and I started playing chords and started singing. And then I pressed stop on the phone and then I went on to something else. And then 2 weeks later, I'm going through my phone and I listen to this and I hear a full song completely finished. And I didn't have to do anything. I didn't want to do anything because I didn't want to, mess up the divine inspiration that came from that moment. But I think I Did It for Peace pretty much sums up that whole experience. And I think that one um, pretty much speaks from the depths of my soul. And God touched me in a way. Um, I grew up Catholic, and we used to pray all the time with my mom. We used to pray before hockey games, before going to school, coming back home. Like we prayed all the time, and so at a very young age, I had a relationship with Jesus. Uh, that was really strong, And I remember playing hockey where whenever I would actually focus, we would say the Lord's Prayer, and every time I would really focus on the words, I'd play a great hockey game. I'd score a goal or an assist, or I was playing defense, so I was able to stop them from scoring. So I would always play a really good game, and any time that I would not focus on the words, sometimes you just kind of go on autopilot and you just say the words, you don't really focus on them with intention, and that's your communion with God right there. That's the moment that you are thanking him, that you're asking him for strength, and it's a conversation. And so, I mean, when you think about having a conversation with someone, if you're not interested and you're not really paying attention, well, the other person's going to feel,
Yeah.
like they're worthless, or they're not important to you. So, something clicked in that, when I realized that when I would focus on the words, God was listening, and he was always listening, but he would, show me that he was listening by having a great game. And so when I was young, I had this relationship with Jesus growing up, and then, watching, I mean, my parents worked. My dad worked from I think it was like 6 in the morning till 5, and then my mom worked from 3 to midnight, and it was like that all the time. So they only saw each other at midnight, and we
Mm.
never had both of them at home for the majority of my upbringing. And so I would come home from school, and my sisters, we have a big family. I had four sisters and a brother. Parents had two other girls before that who passed away, but I only knew four, and my brother. And so you'd come home from school and you'd watch TV. TV was what was basically, keeping you entertained, and you'd be learning through the television. And it's called television for a reason, and television programming for a reason. And so you become programmed, and the shows that you watch, I mean, they're taking God away from everything. And so as I started getting into my teens, um, my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and it was very hard on me because my whole life was my dad. We'd go to hockey games together, and I'd get on a bus from school, go to his work, and then wait for him to finish. He was a mechanic, and I'd wait for him to finish, uh, and then we'd go to the hockey game or the practice or whatever it was, and so all of a sudden I realized that I was going to lose my best friend, and I
Mm.
kind of disconnected from everything. I disconnected from my feelings towards my dad. I remember there was a moment where I didn't want to think that he's not going to be able to um, know my name or recognize me, and that was killing me at the time. And so there was a disconnect, and that mixed with um, watching television, which is of this world, these programs and these movies, and it was just shaping my whole perception of life. And then I started wondering whether or not God even really exists. Like, I mean, I grew up uh, Catholic, and my parents, my mom always praying, and so like, all of a sudden it's like now I'm questioning whether or not my parents are really in the know, or because the television people are telling that God doesn't exist on TV, and then there's all these space programs um, that show, the Big Bang, and we come from apes, and it's totally different from the creation story. And so, and this is science, and science is proven and it's factual, and the Bible was written by sheep herders and goat herders and fishermen, and so it started to really affect me in that way, and I started almost becoming an atheist, really, and my mind was just set on music, on being, a really great guitar player. I was into guitar at the time, and um, so that to me, I became a guitar head. It was like, Eddie Van Halen and a Joe Satriani and a Steve Vai and all these great guitarists of the time, um, and that's all my life was about, And so I lost the spirituality in my life, but my mother always. she always had her foot in on the narrow path all the time, and so my mom's take on the world, and my mom was like a saint, you know what I mean? And so any word that she would say was always a word that was, it was a word that was dipped in the divine, with the Ten Commandments and how to be and how to act. And so, here I am as a teenager in this worldly world, and then my mom kind of grounds me right back into what the truth is.
Hmm.
I didn't know that at the time because I was doubting everything. But and then as I progressed in music, I went to the conservatory and I worked really hard. I got my master's in guitar and my bachelor's. I did everything in 4 years. Normally it takes 6 years, but I practiced, from 6 to 15 hours a day. And so my whole life was that and focused on having a career. And so I was doing classical guitar at the time and also singing privately, taking private voice lessons. And so it wasn't until, I auditioned for the Tenors back in 2006, it was, I believe. Yeah, 2006. And Jillian Siemens, who was the founder at the time, and she gave me a contract right away. And then we had a few other. Then she did she was doing a national audition for the group, and so then I met Victor and Fraser, and we always had a kind of revolving door with the fourth tenor. But during all that time, my mind wasn't on God; it was on success and climbing up that the ladder of success, and that was the goal at the time. And being on the road all the time, and you have all the vices, you have all the things that you could want, but I was always grounded with my parents, having God in their life, that I didn't go completely overboard. But I wasn't on the narrow path, that's for sure. And then I guess it was in 2011 that I started, because I wasn't really a party kind of guy. I wasn't going out and partying or doing any of that kind of stuff. So I'd stay back at the hotel and study and read and research and try to figure things out. And that's when all of a sudden I came across biblical cosmology, and it was totally going against the mainstream science narrative. And I'm like, well, wait a second here. This can't be, And then so I started doing a deep dive into that and starting to realize, wait a second. And I started looking around because I was touring around the world, and I was going and I was seeing all this amazing architecture, and I'm thinking, how could they possibly have built this back in the what they claim during the medieval times, when they have like chisels, hammers, and sandpaper, but yet they're erecting 50-foot columns of marble that's perfectly polished, with what, horse-drawn carriage? I mean, none of this stuff made any sense. And then you look at the structures, the doors were massive, And I remember in Genesis 6:4 talked about that there were giants in the world at the time, in those days, great men of renown. That's Genesis 6:4. And so all of a sudden I'm like, wait a second, does the Bible actually have some truth to it?
Oh,
Because
you're talking about the Nephilim, right?
yeah, the Nephilim,
Yeah.
the Nephilim, which are the offspring of the fallen angels that mated with the women. We get a little snippet of that in Genesis. But then I started opening my eyes as I'm touring around, and I'm seeing all this architecture that is not made for 5 foot nothing humans like you and me. You know what I mean? I'm seeing these doors that are massive doors, 25, 36 feet high, with handles at the top, and then a cutout at the bottom for people like you and me to go through. And so that kind of started getting me to question, and then I started reading the Bible and reading some of the extra canonical books, like the Book of Enoch, the first Book of Enoch, anyways. And it started to explain the Nephilim and how all that came about in this realm that we live in. And then I started doing my own experiments. And that's when all of a sudden I'm like, wait a second, there is a massive lie that's been told to us. And, they always say trust the science, but the science is lying to us. And the Bible, I can see with my own eyes what the Bible has spoken of. You know, there's no reason for a door to be 36 feet high if, if the Bible is, not the truth, right? If it's the truth, then it explains the 36-foot, 25-foot doors. So that was the beginning of my kind of coming back to Christ. And
When you mentioned,
mm,
and I'm sorry, I'm probably going to do this now and then just so I can clarify some things when people listening. When you
yeah,
mentioned the experiments, what was that? Did you mean like what kind of
well,
experiments?
Well, uh, well, for one, during my some of my research, I was, because I was totally into the space programs, and I remember I was in grade six when the Challenger in 1986. I think it was January the 28th, 1986. I'll never forget being in the classroom, and we all had the television there, and we watched the Challenger explode, right? And
Yeah.
Krista McAuliffe and all those teachers, and it was such an impact on, I guess I was like 11, 12 years old at the time. It was a huge impact on the children watching this live. You just watch someone die on television, and and I kept that, and to me it just solidified that, these people died, they were going to space, all of these things were real. And so I never questioned it. To me, it was real. And we went to the moon and all this stuff, and so all of these things I never questioned. And then all of a sudden, I remember now that I realized that there were giants, and I knew that the Smithsonian was hiding the fact, were denying that giants existed. The Smithsonian apparently would get bones from peasants that would find remains of a giant. The Smithsonian would come in, collect them, and then you'd never hear from it again. But what you would do is you go to the museum and you see dinosaurs and you know evolution, all of that presented in the museums as the truth. And those, sorry, we got little puppies downstairs. And the bones that were found from the giants were just completely, brushed away, and nobody would talk about them. Meanwhile, the Holy Book tells us that there were giants, and so why would you be hiding this? So, to me, it was like, why are they hiding this stuff? And then I started watching some footage of space missions, and I started seeing some really weird anomalies. And well, some of them were just complete fabrications. Like, for instance, you'll see an astronaut who is looks like he's grabbing something, right? But he looks just like me. He nothing in his hand, and he's putting it over there. Then on a side screen, it looks like he's taking like a stuffed animal and putting it over there. So they were literally faking what he was doing. And I'm thinking, well, if you guys are really out there, why would you have to fake it? Why would you be faking any of this stuff? Like, why would you pretend that you're grabbing something? And what's the reason behind this? So then I started actually, starting to question some of these government agencies and thinking like,
Yeah.
why would they lie? And
Okay.
then there was the whole 9/11 thing that you go down and you realize, there weren't any planes and all of these things that most people think, they call us conspiracy theorists. But the fact of the matter is that, when you really dig deep and you start researching this stuff, you realize that the official story is nothing but lies. And we know that Lucifer, Satan, is the father of lies
Well,
and
I
the
wanted
great
to,
deceiver.
yeah, I just wanted to add to what you said. Um, for people listening, you may be interested in this because I know part of what I've seen some of the things that Remigio's mentioning here. There's a particular firefighter group, and I don't remember their name now. It's not coming to me. But if you look it up on YouTube, there actually is a documentary that was done by firefighters. Um, and was it Building 7? Am I remembering this in my brain correctly?
Yeah,
Where Yeah, there's a documentary. If you type it in, they're gonna, there's a documentary done by firefighters who were there at the scene that
Hmm.
erase, does raise some very interesting questions on this point. So if you're listening and you're like,
Yeah.
this is absolutely crazy what Remigio is
Hmm.
saying,
Yeah.
it's
Like,
worth looking into because there is a very interesting documentary which I did see recently, which is how I'm
and then there's
understanding what you're
also
saying here.
news footage that they actually wiped off the internet, and of people literally saying, and footage that people caught filming the towers, and there's no planes in that footage whatsoever. But the one that everybody saw on TV, which could easily be manipulated, had a plane going through. And the Tower 7 that you're talking about, it wasn't even hit by a plane, but it went down. And the guy that owned all the towers literally in an interview said, "Yeah, we had to pull it. When you say pull it, it means that you have to
Yeah,
deton
I know
detonate it."
exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
So you're thinking, wait a second, are you telling me that you actually put bombs during a crisis like that? You're able to get into the buildings, set it up with dynamite, and then take it down? It makes no sense. Obviously, it was already set up with dynamite for it to free fall perfectly because no plane actually hit it. And the BBC actually documented that it went down 20 minutes before the building actually really went down. So they already knew about it. So when you start thinking about it, everybody's in on these lies, and you
And you were
realize,
researching this while you were a singer with the tenors,
yeah,
right? So you're
yeah, I
doing
was
this, you're
in the
probably
hotel
having a kind
rooms.
of an existential crisis going on at the same time.
Well, I'm here. I am. The crazy thing is that I'm singing for these politicians. We were singing for Bill Clinton and singing for George Bush and singing
Right.
for the Queen and singing, on these television stations and on these shows. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
we were on the Oprah Winfrey Show, and all of these shows, they all promote the same mainstream narrative. All of
Right.
them do. None of them question it, and it's because you realize that we are living in Satan's world. Satan rules this world, and we know how the story ends. How the book of Revelation explains everything, that he's going to lose anyways. But while he's here, when you read Revelation 20, Satan is loosened for a short season in order to deceive the nations. But he's been deceiving the nations for the longest time, even before he was, uh, you know, uh, in the pit. Now that's a whole other eschatology, another thing that I've delved into.
You got to
But
start
we
your own
realize,
podcast.
well, this is, there's a lot of people that are starting to wake up to this. And the thing is that most people just kind of deny the Bible. They say, oh, it's just, like I said, goat herders and sheep herders, and none of it is real. But that in itself, you know, it what it does is it makes people not want to read it because they just take the word of man. And how many times in the Bible does it say, trust no man, right? And this is what we do. And so a lot of people don't even bother reading. But so I'm like, you know what? No, no, no. I'm going to read the Bible. I want to find out exactly what it says. And you realize that the Bible is a perfect book of prose, a perfect book of prophecy, and it's a history book. And most people don't want to realize that, but we have all the historical characters in there and
Yeah.
all the historical events that are corroborated by historians at the time, including Josephus, Tacitus, uh, explaining all the things that were going on, which is literally written in the Bible. So that's when I realized, okay, this world is completely inverted. And so while I was, like I was telling you, in the hotel rooms, I'm studying a lot of this stuff and just realizing things aren't as they seem. And the biggest, moment for me was realizing the spirituality of this realm. It talks about how Christ is the light that lighteth every man that comes into this world in John, verses 4-9. And that to me, you know, it's a huge revelation because Christ is within us, and it's the light that lighteth every man. And when you go to Revelation 18:23, it says that great merchants of men are going to deceive the nations uh, through sorcery, which is pharmakia, right? And so you have in that verse 18:23, it says, and you will no longer hear or have the light of the bridegroom within you. So what does Satan do in this world? He wants to dim the light that you have, and the light that you have within you is the light of Christ, which lighteth every man that comes into this world, as John mentioned. And so once I realized that all of the media that's out there, I mean, we only hear bad news. We never hear good news. And I mean, maybe at the end of the newscast, you might have, oh, this guy saved a puppy or a cat from a tree or something. But before that, it's all war. It's all horrible news. And, Paul tells us, to focus on the good things, keep our minds always on the good. But here we have, propagated in front of us on television, right? Sorry, television programming us with a vision that is not a godly vision. I mean, when we go to the movies, I remember going to the movies, and it's like nothing. Two people meet, and then and they literally sleep with each other right away, and it's like nothing. And they're not even married, and it's a whole culture of brainwashing that's imposed upon the viewer and desensitizing us to things that are not biblically sound, that they're not part of the Ten Commandments. And so we're living a life of sin that's promoted on through the movies, through Hollywood, through books, through music. I mean, just take a look at the music out there. Like the number one song a few years ago was somebody that was on a pole, pretending to be a stripper. And, mom and dad takes the kids to go see Hannah Montana and to go see Taylor Swift, thinking that this is just wholesome, it's, music that my kid likes. And then you literally go there and there's a satanic ritual on the stage being performed. And, this is what we're exposing our children to. And so, anyways, to make a long story long, while I was while I was in the tenors, I was doing a lot of research and a lot of reflection, and I started seeing the people around me, and I started seeing how people act, and I realized that they were driven by greed, and they were driven by material success, and which is where I was before. I was never greed, but I did want to have success. But at what cost? It tells us, what is it? To gain the riches of the world and but to lose your soul in the process. And so that to me, it was always a reoccurring theme in my mind. There's got to be more to this. There's more to life than just this. And some of the things we were doing with the tenors were great, like going to Africa and helping the orphans and building schools and hospitals and doing concerts to raise money. Like that to me was the juice of it all. That was what gave me a reason to sing. It's one thing to use your voice for entertainment purposes, but it's another thing to use it for the betterment of humanity. And because I was raised with certain values, that my parents instilled in me, I was able to bring that with me, even in the lion's den or in the lair of Satan, where you have all the vices available to you. You have people who tell you you're great and all this, but they all want, you're a stepping stone for them as well. They're trying to climb that same, I call it, snakes and ladders. That game, Snakes and
Oh,
Ladders. Well,
Shoots and Ladders?
yeah. Well, back in my day, it was snakes and ladders, but it's literally
Uh,
people with ladders. It's snakes with ladders. That's exactly what it is. It's like it's an environment that is not conducive to a Christian a Christian belief system. You have to be very, and there's a lot of Christian artists, it's unfortunate, that have taken the path that is the wide path, and their agents and the company that represents them. I mean, when you understand and you start delving into um, these esoteric symbols that they have, that they put out there, that the majority of the people will not understand, but those in the know will understand and will recognize, oh, that's a place that I can go to, and I'll be able to get the vices that I want, or meet the people that I need in order to attain what I want. Unfortunately, a lot of these Christian artists are signed to labels and signed to artist management companies that are literally, satanic, and they're Christian artists. So, but in this world, Satan gives success to those who bow down to him and are okay with going down the wide path. And there was a moment in my life where that changed. I was no longer going to compromise and sell my soul for the riches of this world. And so that's when all of a sudden the crossroads appeared, and I had to make a decision. And to me, I made the right decision because I have a relationship with God, um, that I was lost. I mean, I wrote a song called Lost and Found, and it literally depicts exactly that trajectory that I was on, winning
And
treasures, but losing soul
uh,
in his midst.
yeah, and I was just gonna mention for people listening what Remigio's referring to is that um it was 2016, right?
Yeah,
My
July 12th, 2016.
Yeah, there was forgive me, here I am scratching my ear. That's what happens with these headphones. But I did want to, for people who don't know what Remigio is referring to, if you do look this up, also it's on his website. Um, he made what many people would deem a political statement, but for Remigio Pereira, it was much more, he believed, a humanitarian statement about the
Mhm.
importance that all lives mattered. But at the time that he put up this sign while singing, it was the Canadian anthem, right? And it's the French lyric about it referred to war in some sense or taking up the sword. And
Exactly, yeah.
you changed the lyrics while singing with the group.
Hmm. Yeah, at the
And
time, Alton Sterling was killed. The Dallas police were being killed, and I'm thinking, what's going on here? Every single life is precious. Alton Sterling's life is precious. The Dallas police lives are precious. My
yeah,
cousin is a cop. One of my best friends is black, and to me, God, Jesus died for all sinners, for all lives. Every single one of us mattered to him, that he went to the cross, and by his blood, we were saved. We were all saved. But in this satanic world, they wanted to create the division, whether it's by race, whether it's by uh, gender, whether it's whatever borders, anything that they possibly can to divide us, they will. And so in 2016, it was, they created this Black Lives Matter, and All Lives Matter debate, and, had everybody fighting one another on the streets. And the crazy thing is why would you come up with a moniker that says Black Lives Matter? Why wouldn't Black Lives Matter say, hey, all lives matter, we matter here too? You know what I mean? And that way it would be an inclusive moniker. But Satan works in a way that wants us divided from one another. And and the Black Lives Matter was a Marxist, self-proclaimed Marxist movement for a communistic movement that was being paid for by the likes of George Soros and the likes of global leaders. And so on the media, those who watch mainstream media, they're going to believe, yeah, of course, Black Lives Matter. And I'm like, well, of course, Black Lives Matter, but Black Lives Matter because every single life matters, right?
right.
And uh, and the crazy thing is that it went from Black Lives Matter to Blue Lives Matter to Asian Lives Matter to all children's lives matter. So it's like full circle. We come back to the idea that every single life is valuable. And I changed the lyrics of that anthem, which was promoting, saying, because in French it says, car ton bras sait porter l'épée, il sait porter la croix. So it says, since your arm knows how to carry the cross, right? It can carry the sword. But to me, the cross is the sword, you know?
Right.
And what did Jesus tell Peter when he became violent against the soldiers that were taking Jesus away, and he cut off his ear? He said, "No, Peter, right? If you live by the sword, you die by the sword." So Jesus was telling us that it's not through violence that that we get into heaven. You know what I mean? As Christians, we're supposed to love our enemy. You know, and there's religions out there that say if you're not of this religion, death to you. And so that is literally the opposite of what Christianity is. And so for me, those lyrics didn't represent what God wants. And so I changed them, saying that we're all brothers and sisters, all lives matter to the great, which is the great I am.
So you
And
made, and you wanted it to be a public statement, which is why you did it kind of on your own,
well,
right?
I knew I at the time there was certain things that were happening within the group that I was not okay with. Like for one, we were forced to be wearing these Armani suits, which were being made in Bangladesh and third world countries where there were sweatshops. Yet we were doing concerts for free the children from sweatshops. So I was having, yeah, like you said, a crisis,
Right.
an interior monologue saying, how can I step on stage wearing clothes and sing a song about freeing children from sweatshops, wearing clothes that are made in sweatshops or shoes that are made in sweatshops? I
Right.
couldn't do that anymore. It was driving me crazy because I was no longer being authentic with how God wants us to be. And, it's like, oh, it's okay. Just go, and that's what it was like. It's like, oh, shh, be quiet. Don't worry, just go on stage and, you know, why? Because it was all about the greed. It wasn't about the truth anymore. It wasn't about the truth and the way in the life. It was about getting to that next level of success in order to be able to have your home and have your cars and have your private jets take you where you're going and walking the red carpet and wearing your sunglasses during the nighttime. Just ridiculous things that mean absolutely nothing. I remember when we came back from Africa and we were helping the orphans out there, and we stepped on the red carpet in Toronto for the Toronto Film Festival, and we had just seen some of the worst strife. Children who's it's a complete generation that has been wiped from HIV/AIDS. It's children taking care of children and grandmothers taking care of children because they have no parents, they have no aunts and uncles. There's a massive gap between the generations, and children that are literally found tied to trees and dogs basically starving, eating the children, mauling them, and then going to this hospital and then going to an orphanage and seeing all these things, and then coming to North America, going on the red carpet, and we just have that in our minds of what we just experienced and what's going on in the world. And the first thing that comes out of the people's mouth is, "Oh, what is it that you're wearing today? Which celebrity are you excited to see today? What you know Meaningless things that mean absolutely nothing." And it really made me feel like a prostitute. You
Mm.
know, it made me feel like I am prostituting my talents for this worldly world. And
I wanted
I
to
couldn't do
ask
that
you,
anymore.
yeah, I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you as you were going through this, I'm surprised by what you're describing. Like, did you not want to just leave on your own? And, or did you really
Well,
want to make it still with the group work?
I stayed in much longer than, I mean, there were things that were going on within the group. There were a lot of tensions that were happening. Like for me, I'm kind of like, you know, I like to improvise on stage. I like to go with the flow. And all of a sudden in 2014, we went to like, we had a choreographer, we had someone telling us what to say, how much you can say, and the other person, like at the time I would crack jokes and, on stage between songs because the songs were so serious and so moving and stuff. You need to have some, comedic element or something in between to get people to laugh and, be like a little aperitif to the next palette to be cleaned for the next song, And so that's just kind of how I was. And at the beginning, it was a lot of that. And so the jokes stemmed from that, and people didn't know what you were going to say. And every show was unique. And, we had fans that were coming 50 shows, in a row in a year. They would come to 50 shows and they would have a different show each time. It would have, you know, new jokes, new things. But in 2014, all of a sudden, we started getting people coming around us and telling us, what to say and how to say it and all of these things, and it became very sterile. And I remember the Lead with Your Heart tour. I think I might have said maybe 10 words in the whole concert, right? And whereas before, we'd have the audience laughing all the time, and there were moments where I would say a joke that worked the night before, and the guys would get upset because the next night I would change it and it would throw them off. And it's not like they were apt to improvise as well at the time, I guess it was. And then sometimes they would steal my jokes. I was about to say the joke that worked well, and they would take it, and then they would look at me and wink. Or there was weird things that started happening that I knew that there was some kind of weird demonic spirit that was entering. And I stayed there mostly because Victor had a family, and if I was to leave or do something, it might affect the family and affect things in that way. But it came to a point where it was it was a salvation issue,
So you
and
probably in some ways expected when you did that, when you raised the sign, you probably and changed the lyrics during this song that you were singing before the game. You probably
yeah,
did realize that this is probably going to be the end.
I knew that it was going to be something, but the thing is that we all believe that all lives matter.
Sure.
And so to me, it's like, well, if you all believe that all lives matter, why are you going publicly and saying that you don't believe that all lives matter? I don't get it. I don't understand why you would not literally stand up for the truth that God died for all of us. Why would you not say it? And you know, people have their own reasons. And like I said, we're four individuals. We were put together, and some of us have some similar background. Like Vic and I, we grew up with a big family. We both grew up Catholic, and we both, you know, loving our parents and our mothers, and we're both from the islands. He's from Malta. My parents are from the Azorian Islands, and so we meshed a lot together, and we could see that there was a lot of differences between how him and I were and how we grew up with that were different than some of the people that we were performing with. And so but I didn't realize, I didn't think that the guys would uh do what they did and deny that they didn't think that all lives mattered. I mean, you know, there were many things that were going on beforehand, and it's difficult to kind of get into just because
Yeah. Yeah, and we
I
don't have to. I
I
think it's
yeah, it's just there was, let's just say that there was a lot of tensions, and in the end, the true colors come out, and they made the decision that they wanted, and it didn't have to be that decision. It could be, well, we didn't harbor a racist in our band for 10 years. You know, Remy is not a racist. That was all I was asking them to say, and they never came out and said it. Instead, they said that we don't agree with his political beliefs. And since when is the right to life political? How can the right to life be politicized? It can't. Like, we're talking about the right to life. God gave us each a life, and it's our right to live it and to be able to be present in this world. What right is it for you to say, well, if you're not part of this political group, then you don't have a right to life? That doesn't, it doesn't register. And I know it doesn't register with them too, but they saw the 10 years of their careers go, through their eye by, before their eyes, and they were afraid of losing all that. And, you know, to me, none of that stuff mattered. What mattered to me is the truth. And people say, "Are you willing to die on this hill?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I am." I don't, you know, I've toured the world, I've seen the world, I've, you know, performed with the greats, done all these amazing things, but at what cost is it to your soul if you are okay stepping on stage wearing a suit made in sweatshops and you're singing about sweatshops? Like, to me, it was just like, you know?
So
So,
after when you, because when after this happened, obviously for listeners, there's a lot of videos so you can watch because there were interviews with Remigio about this. There was actually a very lengthy one with him very shortly after this happened. Interview with the Tenors separately when they came onto the news, and it was a big thing for people who are following the Tenors and fans of the Tenors. The
that was
controversy that
huge. Yeah.
happened. I mean, I remember just being stunned. I mean, it was so unexpected, and everyone was just, you know, crazy. It was just such a time. So I encourage you to look up if you're
Mm-hmm.
interested, because there's a lot of information on this. But afterwards, I know you kind of went off the grid, like you said, like nobody really heard what was going on. I mean, obviously, you still had a small following that was like, because you had socials, and we all have that stuff, right? And
Yeah.
then 2 years after this happened, to the
Mm-hmm.
day, you then published the Vox Inaudito, which is where I
Yeah.
Did It for Peace is on, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. I
that
mean,
was,
after everything happened, I mean, I was ousted from the music industry. I had death threats. I was in my house for 3 months. I couldn't go outside. I was told just to keep quiet and that they would go on and tell people that, Remy is not a racist. And I waited and I waited and I waited. And then they held my shares hostage, basically saying that my shares were worthless. And so, you know, basically they just um, gave me peanuts on the dollar for what it was worth. And at that point, I didn't care because I'm not going to be fighting about money. You know, the whole greed in this world is bad enough to me. I just wanted them to set the record straight, saying, we didn't harbor a racist in our band for 10 years. You know, and because that's what I was being called. I was being called a racist, and I had a Maclean's magazine. They basically said, well, Remigio Pereira is either a passive racist or an aggressive one. Take your pick. And they did this big, huge piece. And this is like this is like People's Magazine in Canada, right? And so they put it throughout all the papers. And so now anybody who looks up my name, that's the first thing that comes, and it's like they they think that I'm a racist. And so I was trying to get the guys to say, listen, you didn't harbor racists. I'm not a racist. Like, the truth about all this. And they're, yeah, yeah, we'll let them know. We'll let them know. And it just never happened. And so then finally, after a year and a half or 2 years, it was like I was asked for an interview. And the thing is, at the time, I was being asked for interviews, but nobody wanted me to speak live. They always wanted everything to be taped. And what they were doing is whatever interview I would do, they would literally put words in my mouth and change things and put up what it is that they wanted uh,
sure.
and so now I started taping everything and recording everything. And I mean, even at the time when I was with the boys, like when we were having some issues, I wanted to know that I wasn't going crazy. And so I would tape some of our meetings and stuff, and where things would explode. And literally, I'd be told, oh, no, that's not what I said. And then I'm like, I'm going to go back in here. And I'm like, that's exactly what you said, And so I'd be able to have the proof to show what it was that they were saying. And and so it's unfortunate that it had to come to that, but you know, there's moments where I had to, because they were putting out something. They were saying that I never apologized to them, and so all the fans were coming out. You never apologized to them, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to show that. I'm going to play the tape where I apologized to them 12 times. You know, so I needed to. I felt like I needed to set the record straight because nobody was setting the record straight for me, and they're the ones who went to the media first. And whoever tells the story first, that's what most people believe to begin with. Until, you know, like it says in Proverbs, until someone else comes in, you know, and sets the record straight with proof. Um, but that's unfortunately what happens. And they have the machine behind them. So they're able to go on the ABC and all those, you know, and to just promote because all those networks are already part of the agenda that's pushing the Black Lives Matter. I mean, think about it. I said all lives matter, and I was labeled a racist. I was kicked out of the music industry. I had death threats. And this was 1 month before Kaepernick took a knee. Kaepernick comes out and says Black Lives Matter. All of a sudden, he's on Time magazine. His T-shirt is the world record, you know, selling T-shirt number, you know, jersey. He gets all these book deals, movie deals, everything. Like, so which one is being propagated here and which one is being made an example? And so this is the thing. And I remember, I think J-Lo at one point said all lives matter. And then she had to like retract it and say no, um, because it was going to, you know, probably ruin her career. And so when you realize that there's an agenda out there and there's a lot of money behind it, like at the time, I think it was like $2 billion that were behind Black Lives Matter, but I think it went up to over 200 billion at one point. And then you take a look at some of the cities, like look at Portland, you know, they had to close the city down and it was in ruins, you know, uh with just crime and everything that was going on. And so, and then you look at the leaders of Black Lives Matter, they all had major book deals, movie deals, they have multi-million-dollar homes. So whose life mattered at that point? Was it those who started the movement, or is it the people that they're supposed to be um, representing? You know,
Well,
and so yeah, go ahead.
oh no, I was gonna say, one thing when I was listening to your CD, I could hear the lament. It was very vulnerable. Probably one of the most vulnerable music CDs I'd listened to, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
there's a difference. Music is beautiful. I do believe it is a gift that the Lord has given the world, and music is meant to transcend. That's what I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's meant to
Yep.
transcend. It's meant to take the individual who is listening to a higher place in their mind and their soul, just feeling
Mm-hmm.
whether it be uplifted, even in sorrow. There's a
Yeah.
good sorrow, right?
Yeah.
Kind of similar to your song that you wrote for your dad about Nada Mas. It was a cry of like, this is so much I can't handle anymore. But even as you listen to
Mm-hmm.
it, it's like, yes, I resonate with that, and there's nothing disrespectful about that. It's just very honest, right? But then
Mm-hmm.
with your album, I could hear the pain and the grief you're experiencing from the fact
Yeah.
that you couldn't articulate the truth of your experience to other people, and the media wouldn't listen to you, and then you were
Mm-hmm.
kicked out of the music industry. So everything you had known for so many
Mm-hmm.
years, for 10 years, was no longer a thing.
Yeah.
And you could hear all of that in it. And I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
ask you, now that you're a little farther removed from this, almost 10 years ago now, this has
Mm-hmm.
happened. You know, do you, I mean, how do you have peace in your soul? Because you're mentioning so many times, this person didn't um, come out and say the right thing. These people said nasty things about me. And I remember during this time seeing all these terrible things written about you. And I thought it was really
Mm-hmm.
unfortunate because it was more of like, well, I'd like to hear his perspective as opposed to hearing
Yeah.
you give me a comment on
Yeah.
your thoughts on his perspective.
Yeah.
Um, and you know,
Yeah.
but you're never gonna get that. That still hasn't
No,
happened. I mean, you still have
no.
people, obviously, like myself and others, who still love your music and support the music you're writing and love it.
Hmm.
Um, but it's definitely a fraction of what you had before, like a really small
Oh,
fraction.
totally, totally. And
And
what happens is you don't end up having the platform anymore.
right.
So what happened during after all that stuff happened, basically, like I have a YouTube channel, and what happened was my YouTube channel was cloned,
Mm,
where all the exact same titles, the exact same songs, the same thumbnail, everything was there, and then you would press play, and they put porn on. So they were trying to clone all my videos. They cloned my whole channel with all the videos that I had, and they put porn on it. And then all my Facebook posts, all my YouTube views, everything was halted. So they shadow banned me completely. I was inundated with all these uh um I, they must be bots, I don't know, but all of these promiscuous pictures of women friending me on Facebook. Like it was like 500 of that. It was just, it was an onslaught. So there was a concerted effort in order to take me down, right? Because they didn't want people. I mean, remember, because I'm starting to tell certain, like, discover certain truths about the world that the mainstream does not want other people to know. Like, for instance, I was supposed to do an interview with Q in Canada, and this is a program on the CBC. And they called me and they said, yeah, and I said, listen, it's got to be a live interview. And they're like, yeah, no problem. And they call me literally 5 minutes before going on the air and say, oh, we have a technical issue. We can't do it live. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't do it live? And it's like, we can't do it live. And I'm like, well, then I'm not going to do it if it's not going to be live. And I said, why can't you do it? And then the truth came out. They exploded, well, we can't have you talking about the flat earth and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, what are you saying? Like, because biblical cosmology tells us that the earth is immovable on foundations with a firmament. If you read Genesis and you read the Bible, it's clearly a biblical cosmology. And but the mainstream media didn't want that to be told. And so there was a concerted effort in order to silence me. And so, yeah, it was difficult. I've never found that ability to reach the audience like I used to before, because everything is controlled. I mean, everything is an algorithm. In order to get to an audience, you need to pay for likes, you need to pay for views, you need to pay in order to promote and do a campaign on Facebook, all of these things. But then that means that there's somebody behind the scenes, letting people get to a certain level and then no, bringing them down or not allowing their views to go. Like I have videos that have literally been up for so long and they literally go up one view, if that even, right? And they just stay on at the same. But the crazy thing is that I have a lot of likes and a whole lot of comments on it, where normally when someone pays for views or whatever, they have 40,000 views or 500,000 views and they have like 6 comments on it, where I have like 200 comments, but I have like, you know, 600 views or 3,000 views, if that. And so there's a concerted effort to silence people like me, people telling the truth and exposing the truth and bringing light to the darkness. And so we don't live in a Christian world, and like as much as, especially in the media and what is propagated to us, it's not Christian whatsoever. And so they don't want the Christians to come out and expose the darker side of the music industry or the entertainment industry. And so there is a concerted effort like that. So yeah, I don't have the ability to reach the people like I did before. And you were asking me, how do I find peace in 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 my life in doing that? Well, I live in nature. I got out of the big city. I got out of, you know, I took off all my stuff off of iTunes and everything. I'm not doing this for money. I'm not doing this for likes. I'm not doing this for views. If I can bring someone to the narrow path, if my story can inspire someone, to stand up for the truth and stand up for what they believe in, no matter what the cost is. And my cost, in other people's eyes, who are dreaming of having a career like I had, it's huge, but to me, you know, it's not worth losing your soul, especially when you have that relationship with Christ. When you have that relationship with God, you don't want to lose that relationship with God. And most of the time, that that trajectory is going to take you away from Christ. And it's literally it's a selfish trajectory. It's all about me. It's all about what I want, my desires, attaining my goals, as
Yeah.
opposed to helping your neighbor, as opposed to doing what God wants. Right. So
Well, I did want to
I,
ask you because you've mentioned, flat Earth and several different aspects of
mm-hmm,
disagreement among believers, right? Not everyone agrees about those different things. And I
yeah,
wanted I wanted to ask you, um, because I definitely am a Christian, believe Jesus died on the cross for my sins, but I believe if you believe that too, that Jesus died on the
mm-hmm,
cross for your sins, and
yeah,
that he is the only way to heaven,
yeah,
then you are saved. And
yep,
so it's okay if we
mm-hmm,
disagree about whether the earth is flat or round. So for
100%. It's
I
not a
wanted to
salvation
ask you,
issue. Yeah,
yeah, I was going to say to you, if you have a friend or someone who's going to come up to you and go, Remigio, I just don't believe in the flat earth, or I don't believe in, the 9/11 thing you
mm-hmm,
mentioned.
yeah.
I don't, but I want to have that connection with you. I want us to be friends and still disagree about this. Is
Oh, yeah, and you
I
totally
wanted to
can.
ask
Yeah,
you because sometimes I have met people where their passions or their convictions, because what I hear in you is a
yeah,
conviction, which is not
mm-hmm,
a bad thing to have a conviction. But
yeah,
when it comes to the point where your conviction is so strong that anyone else who does not believe that conviction, you're like, we're done. Which I have
mm-hmm. No,
met
I've
people
never.
like
Yeah,
that. I
there are
wanted to ask
totally,
you,
totally are. Yeah,
I wanted to make sure, just for my audience too, to give that
yeah,
moment for you because I'm sensing this strong conviction from you, which is good, but at the same time, do you allow
mm-hmm.
for differences in things like, oh, is the earth flat, or did
Oh, yeah,
9/11 happen, or did the moon landing happen? Or
yeah,
do you find that to be part of the salvific story, if that makes sense?
yeah. I don't think it's not a salvation issue at all. So, like you had mentioned, believing in Him, not denying His name, keeping the commandments, um, and shining the light that is within you, which is His light, and being more like Jesus. These are the things that you know we want. But I'm not preaching to the choir. You're already saved. You already have that. So whether you believe the earth is flat or not, it doesn't matter. To me, it's those who are on the fence about God even existing,
I
about,
see.
they're so into the science of things. It's interesting because just yesterday, my girlfriend's son came down, um, with his girlfriend from Australia. And we were literally having this because he believes that the earth is round, and that the stars are trillions of light years away, and all of these things that we were all taught. I mean, I was taught the exact same thing. So like, I already know that whole way of thinking. I was educated in the exact same thing. It was very difficult for me to say, I'm going to put that on pause and I'm going to question it. Because if we don't question things, then we're just going to continue regurgitating everything that we've said. And that's exactly what happens is like, oh no, I mean, and there's a famous line in The Lion King, you know, where Simba is talking to his father, and he says, "Yeah, Dad, you're gonna be with me. We're buddies, right? Yeah, you're gonna be with me forever, right?" And he's like, "Simba, when look up to the stars. Those are all the kings of the past, right?" He says that,
Yes,
and
I
he
do
says,
remember
"When you
that.
when you have a hard time in life, look up to the stars and know that I am there looking down on you." Then he finds himself with Timon and Pumbaa, right? And they just finished eating a whole bunch of food, and they're sitting there looking up at the stars. And then Timon says, or Pumbaa says, "Timon, what are those things up there in the And then Timon says, I know what those are. Those are fireflies caught up there in the blackish bluish thing. And then the dumb pig says, oh, I thought that they were balls of gas burning trillions of light years away. And then he says, oh, Pumbaa, to you, everything is gas. And they have a laugh at it. And then they say, Simba, what do you think it is? Now, Simba's timid to say what his dad said, right? That it's basically the spirits of those of the past, the kings of the past looking down upon us. He doesn't want to say it. So then when he actually says, oh, come on, say it, say it. He's like, well, somebody once told me that, those are the great kings of the past looking down upon us. All of a sudden there's silence. And then there's laughter, roaring laughter. You hearing that there's a bunch of dead guys looking at us. That's the most ridiculous thing. And he's like, yeah, kind of ridiculous. So they make fun of the truth in that scene because they don't want people to know the truth. So they literally make fun of it. So I grew up watching that, with my nephews. My nephews grew up watching that. So they believe what Pumbaa said because that's what science says. Science says that they're balls of gas trillions of light years away. So that's how you brainwash a whole generation of people. So when I'm talking to people now, I'm not talking to those who are saved because it doesn't really matter. What I'm trying to do is get people onto the narrow path. And what I'm trying to do is use their language, science. If they can lie to you about this, what else are they lying about? If the Smithsonian can hide evidence of the giants and tell us that giants never existed, but the Bible tells us that it existed, and you're a man of science, you're going to believe the Smithsonian. You're going to say the Bible's not the truth.
Yeah.
So those are the people that I'm trying to reach. And the majority of the world are those people because they watch the mainstream media. They've been fed the exact same things in school that I was fed. I had to pause my mind and say, I'm going to pause my beliefs that I've been programmed by my school, institutionalized, and told what to believe. Meanwhile, nobody's been to space to be able to tell us if that is the case. Only those who claim to have been to space. When you read up about those people, okay, for instance, they are people who are in a society that keeps secrets. They're all Freemasons. And so when you think about that, are you going to believe someone that keeps secrets and tells you, what the mainstream wants, or are you going to believe the word of God? The word of God tells us that the earth is a circle. It's got a face. It's on foundations. It's got four corners, which means it's a circle within a square with foundations, and it's got a firmament made of molten glass. And when you look at science, when you look at Elon Musk sending the rockets up, we talk about the waters above in the Bible. Well, when you see the rocket, it hits something and it doesn't go any further. And then it starts looking like a boat on water that's dispersing, the foaming waves behind it. And that's exactly what happens to the rocket from Elon Musk. So if I tell someone who believes that the rocket is going into space and I show them, look at that, that looks like a speedboat on water. Well, take a look what the Bible says, that there's waters above and there's a dome. And what it looks like that rocket actually hit a dome. And then I go to people and say, well, look, here's an astronaut. We were told that if you wanted to be an astronaut, you have to have all your sciences. You have to be super smart. You got to be physically fit. You got to know know everything there is to know about space and the environment and all of those things, because if you're going into space, you need to be prepared for it. Well, when you watch an interview with Alan Bean, who apparently went to the moon during the Apollo missions, right? And he's asked, about the Van Allen belts that were discovered 10 years before he went to the moon. And that these Van Allen belts are dangerous radiation belts that are between 5,000 and 25,000 miles from the surface of the Earth. So when he's asked about them, he says, so when you went to the moon, which is 238,000 kilometers away, when you went to the moon, did you feel anything when you encountered the Van Allen belts, when you went through the Van Allen belts? And this is the smart, intelligent, well-read, physically fit, knows everything there is to know, and he's the pilot bringing precious cargo that is worth $32 billion of taxpayer money into space. Do you know what he said? And this is verbatim what he said. Well, I don't know if we went that far into space in order to encounter the Van Allen belts. Maybe we did. Excuse me. The Van Allen belts are between 5,000 and 25,000 miles from the Earth's surface. You went to the moon. You went to the moon, and the moon is 238,000 kilometers away. And he says, well, then we went right through it. How can you now take this person's word and believe it? So when I'm talking about the flat earth and I'm talking all these things, like what did the media do? They said the 5 things you need to know about Remigio. He's anti-vax. He believes the earth is flat. All of these, all the conspiratorial things to make me look like a crazy nut, because that's what they need to do. Meanwhile, if you actually reason with your own mind and you reason with people, ask yourself, would an expert not know everything there is to know about the most dangerous place that he's going through? And if you're the pilot of that vessel, should you not know about it? And this guy had no clue where the Van Allen belts were, which were discovered 10 years prior to his mission. And even to this day, they cannot go through the Van Allen belts because it's dangerous radiation. And why have they never gone back to the moon? Because they never went to begin with. Because if you know biblical cosmology, the earth has the firmament around it, and the sun and the moon and the stars are in the firmament. So you cannot transverse the firmament. We are literally on this flat plane, which is why they call a plane, because it's flying over a plane, right? That's why they call it a planete, plane. There's a plane, the word plane in there. Not only that, even pilots, when they go and they get their pilot's license, when they're studying, it's with the assumption that they're on a flat, non-rotational plane. And so if it's written in their books and they're telling us it's with the assumption of that, and a gyroscope works only on a flat plane, sundials only work in the same way, someone is lying. And I don't believe Jesus is lying to us. I believe that the word is 100% the truth. I believe it's a history book. And I believe most people have been deceived by the mainstream, media. These are the things that they want us to think, so that we can now think that we come from apes, that we weren't created, because now you take away God, you take away intelligent design. Now you come from a big bang, a big explosion. Nothing created everything. I've never seen a book be created from an explosion with a chapter, with pages, with numbers, with table of contents, and the content inside. Never have I ever exploded anything and created anything except destruction. So how is it possible that all life created from an explosion? That is a satanic lie in my research that I've done. And I realize that not everybody has gone the same path. They haven't read the same books. They haven't had the same teachers. So I respect that. And it's not a salvation issue, but it is a salvation issue to those who don't even believe in God, who are atheists, those who believe and trust the science. Like we've had the last 5 years of COVID. If I would have trusted the science, I would be dead right now. But I couldn't, because I have a blood condition that my hematologist said if I was to get the vaccine, that I would be dead. And so, but I couldn't fly. I couldn't travel. I couldn't get out of my home. We were all, our elderly people were locked up. And my cousin, who is a CrossFit champion, vegan, works out 4 times a day. The unfortunate thing is that he works for the government. He was working from home and he had to get 2 of the vaccinations. He trusted the science. And now he has myocarditis and he's got shakes like Parkinson's for the rest of his life. And so this is the thing. I know it's not a salvation issue, And I spent countless of hours during those, last 9 years arguing with people online. I'm not arguing with Christians. Sometimes I was arguing with the Christians because I'm trying to show them that, well, just read. If you read your Bible, you will see that it's on foundations. Like God tells us these things. You know, if you read the book of Enoch, which they removed from the Bible, you see how the sun works and how. And not only that, if you think about it, King Hezekiah in the Old Testament, King Hezekiah, God stopped what? He didn't stop the earth moving. He stopped the sun, and he brought the sun back 10 degrees. Apparently it's the earth that's rotation. In science it's the earth that's rotating, but the Bible tells us it's immovable. God stopped the sun and brought the sun back 10 degrees and gave 15 years to King Hezekiah to get his house in order. So why wouldn't he stop the earth and just and do that? He didn't. He stopped the sun. So there's so many instances. There's a site that you can go to. It's like 200 biblical proofs that the earth is flat, stationary, immovable, and it lists every single Bible verse. And there's over 200 of them that show what biblical cosmology is. But the thing is, it's not just biblical cosmology, because the Mayans thought the same thing. The Vedics, the Nordics, the Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, all of them had the exact same cosmology. It was only in the 1500s that Copernicus came in and said, hey, you know what? It's the sun that the Earth moves around the sun. It's not the sun moving around the Earth, and that
Well,
created a whole.
I think what you're saying is that these things you want to share with those who are atheists, perhaps because it could open the door for
Yes,
them to think
exact
on
for
a
them.
biblical level.
Exactly. For them to think, wait a second, those goat herders and sheep herders, they were quite intelligent. Like, for instance, when you think about it, it took science over 2,000 years to catch up with what John said in verses 4 to 9. Christ is the light that lighteth every man that comes into this world. In 2017, science found that there's a flash of light that happens at the moment of inception when the sperm enters the egg. 2017. And John told us way back when that Christ is the light that lighteth. And what did God tell us? He said that the kingdom is within you. God is within us. The light of Christ is within us. Why would he say that the light would be dimmed in you because of the great merchants of men in Revelation 18:23? Because the light is within us. And science found that out in 2017. You can go on YouTube and you'll find a flash of light. And what they'll say, science will say, oh, uh, that is just the process of the liquid that it's in. It's I can't remember what they're calling it, but the fact of the matter is that there's a flash of light that happens in that moment of inception, which is so important to those who believe that life begins at that moment, because every life matters, and we live in a world that is okay with killing children, okay with like at the time they used to sacrifice children to Moloch. And there's no difference between Planned Parenthood today, sacrificing children, getting abortions, doing all of these things, and the world is okay with it. And if we continue in that way, this world is no different than Sodom and Gomorrah. All the things that go on in this world, all the pedophilia, and in the music industry, and in politics, and in every part of society that is high ranking that you need to climb, all of this is there. Everything is there, and they need to capture you in doing something bad that they can blackmail you in order to keep you under control. And I don't want to live in a world like that. I want to expose the darkness, but I also want to bring people to God. And that's what Jesus tells us. We need to be winning souls. And I'm not preaching to the choir. Obviously, those who know Jesus and believe in his name, and are washed, repent, and keep the commandments. These are the people that are already saved. But you have so many people that don't know Jesus, that believe in science, that have been lied to by science. And I'm just trying to show, listen, if you have a scientific mind, let's analyze this for a second. Okay, explain to me why, if science tells us that the curvature of the earth is 8 inches per mile squared, how is it that you can see across 40 miles or 32 miles? This is the experiment that I was doing. I bought myself a camera that had an 82 zoom lens, and I could see across Lake Erie 32 miles, and that should have been under 632 miles of curvature, feet of curvature. I shouldn't have been able to see the buildings that I could see. And then the higher up you go in altitude, the horizon rises with you. So there's so many things, so many experiences that you can do yourself. And I just started opening my eyes and realizing, well, there's these buildings that were definitely built, during the time of giants, because there's no possible rhyme or reason for them to have 36-foot doors for us humans. And these buildings are impossible feats of architecture too. We don't build like they used to. And they claim that they were built during time of horse-drawn carriage, donkeys, sandpaper, chisels, that they didn't have the technology. I think I think that we had the technology. I think the further back we go, the closer we were to God. From Adam and Eve, we were actually communicating with God. And then they were expelled from the garden. And then God was not going to be in the presence of any kind of darkness because it had to be pure. And then in the garden, it was purity. They became impure, and so they had to be put out of the garden. At that point, you have the seed of Cain, and Cain is the seed of the serpent, of the evil one. So you have Cain who murdered Abel. Then you have Seth. Seth is the line that gave us Jesus, and they don't have any of the bloodline of the Nephilim in that. But you have the line of Cain, which is the line of the Nephilim. And the problem is that God saw that Noah was pure in his generations, but he was married to Naamah. Naamah was Tubal Cain's sister, so she had the Nephilim bloodline in her, the angel bloodline in her, from the evil one, from the serpent. And so then you had Ham, who saw the nakedness of his father. If you go to the book of Leviticus and you find out what seeing the nakedness of the father is, it's literally having sexual relations with your mother. It's having sexual relations with the person, with the mother. So he was banished, and then you have his son that was cursed, right? Noah cursed his son. And so you had another set of Nephilim blood and giants post-flood. Now, when you take a look at some of these buildings, like some of these cathedrals that are impossible feats of architecture, they have the Holy Family embedded into the architecture. So they cannot be antediluvian because the Holy Family was not known in Noah's time, right? It was prophesied by Enoch at the time, and in the Old Testament it was prophesied, but they didn't know Mary, Joseph, the baby Jesus. They didn't know the names. They didn't know the figures. They didn't know all the patriarchs, the all the saints, all the prophets. And in these structures of impossible feats of architecture, you have the prophets, you have Jesus, you have Mary and Joseph, the Holy Family embedded into it. So obviously that came after Jesus. So either, we're hunter gatherers and we were come from monkeys and we were really dumb at one point and we became intelligent, or the intelligence was when we were close to God, then we lost that. There was some kind of cataclysmic event. Obviously, the flood happened and there was a reset, and then we started from scratch again. But I believe that that technology has been around for the longest time because it's impossible for us to think that during the medieval times, right, during the Dark Ages, where they claim that nothing of importance happened and nothing was written down, that they were able to build these impossible feats of architecture using the tools that they claimed that they had back then on horse-drawn carriage, carrying, pillars of marble, chiseled, perfectly buffed, and erecting them 50 feet high. I mean, using donkeys and horse-drawn carriages, like none of that makes sense. So someone is lying. I don't believe the Bible is lying. I believe man lies. And the Bible tells us not to trust man. And I think these are stories. History was written, they say by the winner. And here we are. We no longer believe the Bible. We have a worldly world that does not believe the Bible. And I'm just trying to awaken those people because those are the ones that are vulnerable to to losing their salvation. So they have a chance. And so it's by using science that I was trying to
Yeah.
show people on social media things that they already know, that we've all studied, and showing the holes in the story. And so you asked me, that's a long-winded answer, but how do I find the peace? I find peace in knowing how the story ends, and knowing uh, that the Bible is the truth. When you know that, there's a sense of calmness that happens, that it doesn't matter what happens. We know how the story ends, and if you give your life to Christ and you live a life as He wants us to live, I mean, what else is there in life? If you know that you're going to a place that is um, filled with love and His light and being in His presence, going home, that in itself brings peace to my heart. And
Yeah.
so that is how, to me, it's not about the riches and the status in this world. It's about, you know, getting to the next one and being in the presence of God, and being able to live in His presence in the
Yeah.
New Jerusalem. That to me is what brings me peace. We're just here for a short amount of time, but what we do here, is measured by the love that we've shown one another. And I think that is the true measurement of a life well lived, is to be more like Jesus. And
Yeah.
God is love. In this world, they say, oh, love is love. No, 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 no. God is love.
Yeah.
You wanting the fleshly desires of this world is not godly, because if you read the Bible, you know that a lot that's going on in this world is abominations. And so, um, yeah, my life took a huge turn, and I am at peace because I now am fully, completely convicted in the truth of the Bible, that it is God's word, and that it's a history book, that Jesus walked this earth, that God incarnated His own creation in order to show the truth, the way, and the life everlasting, and how to get there. That to me is the most important thing. So,
Well, I have to say, Remigio, it's been a gift to talk with you. I'm very grateful for how honest you've been. And for my listeners, I
mm-hmm,
do want to say with you, whether Remigio and I believe on different aspects of the earth and so forth, what
mm-hmm,
encourages me and what I even read today, and I want to say to you guys, is that, I was reading, it's funny you mentioned Noah. I'm actually in that in my Bible reading now. And the Bible
mm-hmm,
does say that the reason why the flood came was because there was evil in man's heart continually, and all men. And
mm-hmm,
so the flood came, and Noah was saved by God's grace because Noah walked with God.
yep,
And that is such an encouragement to me, and it seems to Remigio as well, that God's grace is so great that we do believe that He sent His Son down on the cross to save our sins. And if you
mm-hmm,
believe in Him, you will get to be in His presence forever, no matter how bad this world gets, and no matter what we mess up with and we sin. The Lord is faithful and He is gracious and His sacrifice
mm-hmm,
is pure. Now, obviously, those you know who listen to the podcast, I love hearing all perspectives. Several of the people I talk to do not believe that. And I value all of these stories, but for my own personal belief, and when I get to connect with those who also believe the same, it is an encouragement to get to share that. So, Remigio,
mm-hmm.
thank you again for being on the podcast. Thank you for your music. And
A
thank
pleasure.
you that you have a heart. I see that you have a heart to know the truth. And so I pray that the Lord continues to direct you. And thank you for being on this podcast.
Thank you, Danielle, and thanks to all those still listening after all of that. It's it is a mind bender, and like I said, it's not a salvation issue, and so we're all brothers and sisters in Christ. And the most important thing is knowing Him. And so, to me, all it does is that it just points to the truth of it all, and that everything that was written is the truth. So, it helps corroborate what Jesus was telling us, what God told us through the Ten Commandments, through the prophets, through all the stories and the parables that Jesus gave us, and the revelation that John got, the visions, all of those things. It just it all it does is illuminate them to get us to think, well, wait a second, that is exactly, and everybody makes connections at different times. And so, like I said, it's not a salvation issue, but it's more to those who are nowhere near they're on the wide path, and they're nowhere near the narrow path. And it's just to bring them a little closer to actually think that, hey, wait a second, maybe there's more to this Bible thing than meets the eye. I'm not going to just listen to what everybody else says and what
Yeah,
all the television
you're right.
programming is
The
saying.
critical thinking is very important. Very important.
Exactly. So important. So thank you for having me on the show, and good luck with everything. I hope God blesses you and your podcast, and that we see each other again, maybe
Yeah.
in New Jerusalem, if not sooner.
Yeah, and then we will sit down and we will talk together and parse out all these things, and then we'll have God come sit with us and be like, "Hey, help us out."
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
Remigio, also, you need to start a podcast. I think you
Oh,
need to
well,
start a podcast. You need to think about it.
yeah, I'll think about it. I mean, there's a lot of people doing a lot of good work like you out there, and um I've been doing concerts and just trying to help those who are in need. And if I can if I can inspire someone with the story and with what I've been through, I mean, it's we realize that our lives, there's tribulation in it. Everybody has a story, but when we think about the purest of the pure and what he had to go through, and to think that he had no blemish. How many blemishes do we have? And it's just, it puts everything into perspective. And so, maybe a podcast would be something to be able to share and to hear other people's perspectives, because like we might not all agree on certain things, and everybody gets to a certain point once they're ready. you know God reveals things in the time that we need, and at the time God was revealing what he told me. He revealed to me what I had to do. He told me that I had to do that sign, that I had to say that all lives matter, that to say united we stand, you know and it was the most difficult thing, but I have no regrets, because now I have that relationship with him that's completely solidified. And I know I you know I don't need to believe, because I know. Whereas before I was like, oh, is this really true? Is this really now? I know. So he took that doubt completely out of my life. And that was the gift that he gave to me in exchange for the path that I was on. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I'd go through it all again, all the hardships and everything, because all it did was awaken me to the truth and to make me find that narrow path and start that long journey on it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Remigio, thank you. And thank you, listeners. And I hope you have a good day and enjoy the time with your animals. It sounds amazing. I wish I could meet them all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'll show you
keep
I'll show you this one.
teaching, keep teaching your injured geese to fly.
Yeah.
That's
Well, she's doing a
amazing.
great job. She's doing a great job on her own now. So she's teaching the young ones now. But yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. Thank you for bringing people to the narrow path, and celebrating this truth that is the most important truth in this existence that we call life. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. God bless you and your family, and we'll see each other again soon.
Okay.
All
Bye.
right. Take care. Bye bye.